Welcome back to the debate on France 24, where we have been discussing the many implications of today's sentencing of a so-called mastermind of Rwanda's genocide by the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda. And joining me again to continue the discussion here in the studio to my right, George Kazolius, a journalist from AITV and professor of global communications at the American University of Paris. Here to my left, Albert Rudatsimburia, who is director and senior editor at Contact FM Radio in Kigali, privately owned station there. Joining us via satellite from Montreal, Canada, Payam Akhavan, former UN prosecutor at The Hague and professor of international law at McGill University. And from New York, Philip Gurevich, editor of the Paris Review, staff writer for The New Yorker, and author of Stories from Rwanda. Thanks all so much for joining us. Albert, let me begin with you. Unfortunately, you weren't with us in the first half of the program. I just want to ask you if you think this court and its verdicts are good for Rwanda. Are Rwandans grateful for the ICT?
You know, this court was a problem from the beginning. You know, the location, everything. I mean, Rwanda. Why going to Tanzania and why you could have done it in Rwanda? Imagine that the whole problems of infrastructure, like getting the witnesses there and all of that, and then picture this, that the Rwandans who had to go there and testify and seeing the perpetrators in good hands, doing all right, and maybe they were really victims, maybe also infected with AIDS and things like that, while the perpetrators were supported by doctors, things like that. Okay. Imagine
and then the genocidaires were seen to be well treated by the court. While
exactly.
Okay.
So, but that's
those
just
are the logistical problems.
Just a few things, just to see how Rwanda pictures the whole tribunal. Then secondly, it's taking so long, 14 years to have a couple of guys sentenced and all that. Then thirdly, I would say on today, I mean, it's incredible. I mean, these guys are guilty of genocide, but not of planning the genocide. I mean, and that is a big contradiction. And that opens the way to genocide denial.
So is this helping Rwanda heal at all, or is it, in a sense, even causing greater division among?
No, Rwanda they have their own track to really find their own solution. In fact, so I don't think ICTR will do anything to Rwanda or to Rwanda's mood at all. I mean, I think everybody will be happy that it was guilty now, found guilty. But I think Rwanda they found their own way out.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, Payam, how does that make you feel, being a part of that court system, the international justice system, that it isn't exactly appreciated? I mean, in part because these processes take so painfully long to deliver verdicts, and because the logistics are so difficult. Is there a way should it be done better?
People forget what the conditions were in Rwanda after the genocide. There were only 40 magistrates in all of Rwanda, 130,000 people in Rwandan prisons. And establishing a tribunal in those circumstances was extremely difficult, and it was also an unprecedented experiment. After the Yugoslav tribunal, the Rwanda tribunal was the second experiment in international criminal justice. We've learned a lot of lessons. I would agree that the Rwanda tribunal failed in its outreach to the Rwandan population. A lot of mistakes were made. But at the end of the day, we should not take for granted that those genocidaires are now in prison. Were it not because of the Rwanda tribunal, there is no way that the Rwandan government would have been able to arrest those people through extradition or other means.
Okay.
And the fact that those people are in prison, the fact that there's an objective historical record for future generations should not be discounted. We should not forget that in Germany, after the Nuremberg judgment, it was 1 or 2 generations after that the Germans began to understand the historical significance. One final point, Andrea, it is incorrect to say that the court did not find that there was no planning of the genocide. On a technical ground, the court found that there was no conspiracy to commit genocide, but indeed that Bagosora had planned and organized the genocide. So this is a sort of legal metaphysical distinction, if you like, between what it means to have a conspiracy, which is a specific meeting of the minds, as opposed to being found guilty of planning the genocide, which indeed is what the verdict against Bagosora is.
Okay, Philip, I know you had a comment. Go ahead.
Let me just say, first of all, that this idea that one has to look back to how Rwanda was in August of 1994 to understand why the international community decided that there could not be trials by Rwandans makes one have to ask even more, how come it's 14 years later that the wonderful international trials are finally getting some of the verdicts that they were after. Rwanda now has more than 14 magistrates. And I think what's really critical here is understanding that on a certain level what the international justice system that was imposed on the Rwanda situation did, I totally agree that it constricted the international space available to the genocidaire in exile, and in that sense it served an important function. But it simultaneously essentially implied that Rwanda was incapable of conducting trials on its own and could not even be assisted or helped to bring its own standards up to something that could ever be acceptable. And in that sense, it effectively delegitimated any Rwandan process before it could start. And I think that's very, very important in understanding where we are now and understanding why Rwandans feel disaffected. It's not merely that it's in Arusha, Tanzania, which is easier to get to from Zurich than it is from Kigali, at least until recently. But it's really this sense that implicit in that is the judgment that Rwanda can't do this fairly. And that goes back to a point that George made earlier. He keeps calling these international tribunals victor's justice, which is a very puzzling term in response to a genocide. I'm not sure who the victors in the genocide are. If the victims are the dead of the genocide, the victors would probably be the people who are being put on trial for having successfully killed them. I don't think that's what he means. He's suggesting somehow, is the international community victorious? The international community was disgraced. So I think it's a very important thing not to simply try to delegitimate the findings of this tribunal when one also addresses the fact that it's deeply, deeply flawed and has not done much to resolve the ongoing historical and political tensions of Rwandan history.
George, go ahead. I know you had a response.
Well, I think if you push well, we're not going to be able to go there tonight, but my logic is there are victors in what happened there, and they've pocketed a lot as well. I just think that viewers need to know some numbers.